members of the bin Laden family in one of his trips to Saudi Arabia.
The bin Laden family had been introduced to Carlyle many years before President Bush ever became associated with Carlyle. And they were introduced in a quite legitimate way as a potential investor in one of our investment funds, which they did invest in. And in addition, we offered up and did perform certain financial advisory work in connection with an investment they were thinking about, and indeed one that they did make in the United States, where there was simply hard business analysis and advice rendered. I can tell you, Bakr bin Laden, in his wildest imagination, I suspect, never imagined that Osama would go and do what he did. So then you roll forward 3 or 4 years, and all of a sudden 9/11 has happened, and the first thing you know is, well, President Bush is associated with Carlyle, and Carlyle has some bin Laden money. Well, what's going on here?
The relationships between Carlyle and Saudi Arabia began when Steve Norris developed a very nascent relationship with Prince Al-Walid bin Talal, who is a very wealthy, very flamboyant Saudi Arabian prince who loves the United States and loves to invest his money in the United States.
There was always a running joke, there's always been periods where there were excess capital, and people would try to figure out how to access that. For a while it was the Japanese, and it's always been the Kuwaitis and so forth.
And now it was the Saudis.
And that was the Saudis, and people would say, let's try to find a prince to do something. I mean, it was the kind of thing you just said. It was humorous, and no one really... So I remember when I got a call from Dick Paulson saying, we have a prince we want you to talk to. I said, right, what else do you want me to do? What are you trying to do here? Do you want me taking a lunch? I mean, what is it you really want? He said, no, you got to take this seriously. So I said, all right, okay. Because everybody had heard these stories for years. Prince Al-Walid is the grandson of the founder of the kingdom. It's Prince Al-Walid bin Talal, and Prince Talal, his father, had actually spent a fair amount of time around Washington. In fact, owned a major estate in Washington at one point in time.
At the time, this was in the early 90s, Citigroup, which is America's largest bank, was faltering. It was in serious trouble. It was in danger of declaring bankruptcy. And Steve was able to put together a deal between the Prince and Citigroup in which the Prince invested $590 million into Citicorp. And an investment like this was enough to save the bank, and it was a big deal. It was the biggest deal that Carlyle had ever made.
But then through the Prince, you got also in contact with the other
yes,
people
through the profile and then, as I said, we'd hired this gentleman, Basil Rahim, to introduce us, and so we went to meet with a number of Saudi families. And in fact, as you know, one of the families that was introduced to Carlyle and to me in those days was the bin Laden family.
The reason that all of this was able to happen is that the United States had just completed the Gulf War in, I think, 1991, and the Saudi monarchy was eternally grateful for what the United States had done. It had restabilized the Middle East.
The big spur was the Gulf War, and people seeing Bush Sr. and James Baker as the heroes of the Gulf War.
The bargain that was struck basically gave the United States preferred access to Saudi energy in return for protection against foreign foes. And when the requirement arose in 1990, the United States kept its end of the bargain, stepped forward and helped to defend the kingdom and then liberate Kuwait. And the result was that there was an enormous outburst of good feeling in both countries. Trade boomed, and the military relationship, of course, became stronger than ever before.
The Saudi people close to the Saudi royal family, as a kind of as a favor to their benefactors, Bush and Baker, encouraged private Saudi business people to invest in the Carlyle Group.
A lot of what I was doing was trying to convince Prince Fahd Abdullah, who I think was an Air Force general, but also he was the minister in charge of the offset program, that Carlyle would be a good financial advisor.
Carlyle managed this program for Saudi Arabia, which essentially was a program that encouraged investment from foreign countries into the kingdom, but the money that was made from those investments had to be reinvested. Some percentage of it had to be reinvested in the kingdom.
You'd say, Your Highness, look, we have access at a higher level to some of these companies who have offset obligations. We think will be helpful to you in getting that interest generated. Now, they're not going to go do something just because Jim Baker says, why don't you do this? Now, can he get a meeting? Yes. Can we go in and make a presentation to the right operating group, and if it makes sense, are they going to take it seriously? Yes. That's what Jim Baker can do.
So Carlyle was managing this program, which made them, in some ways, a gatekeeper to the investment community in Saudi Arabia. I mean, they knew where the money was coming from and where it was going to. So they had a very unique position in Saudi Arabia and grew very close with the royal family, with the Bin Laden family, and they were able to really cozy up with the Saudis and get a lot of investments from there.
And this became a huge arena for corruption, because instead of just paying a bribe to somebody in the royal family, now you could set them up in business. And you could say, well, this business is part of our offset commitment to you that goes with this arms sale. And so we're going to take, this son of this prince and create a little company for him that's going to be funded by Boeing. But all Boeing's doing is recycling the money out of the arms deals. They get $9 billion, they kick some of it back. So Carlyle, I think, was brought in to try to put some legitimacy on this process.
That was the foot in the door into Saudi Arabia. From there, they were able to expand their business in the kingdom through, they bought a company called Venel.
The Venel Corporation is sensitive. It took the company 5 years to win the contract with the Saudis, and the negative interest displayed by some in Congress and the media has made the company men less than enthusiastic about talking about the Saudi agreement.
We've been in business since 1931, and we've been in Saudi Arabia. We ran the Dhahran Air Base for 5 years for the U.S. government, and we've had technical services operations since 1944.
I was on the board of directors of Venel for about a year and a half. Carlyle really didn't own that company directly. It was acquired by BDM, which was a company that we owned or had a controlling interest in, which we'd acquired, as I say earlier, as I mentioned. And Venel, from what I could see as a director, and I say I was the director of this company for a year and a half, was simply in the business of providing advice and training to the Saudi National Guard.
These are Saudi Arabian recruits at the United States Naval Training Center in San Diego. Classes are conducted in English, but when the men drill, the commands are strictly in Arabic, and the marching style is British.
The Saudi National Guard's main purpose is to defend the Saudi monarchy against internal threats. So this wasn't the case of a U.S. company helping them protect themselves from Iran or another country. It was if there is a challenge to Saudi rule from the Saudi people, this U.S. company is going to help the Saudi National Guard put down that rebellion.
Bij een bomaanslag in de Saoedi-Arabische hoofdstad Riyadh zijn zeker 6 mensen gedood en tientallen raakten gewond. 5 van de slachtoffers zijn Amerikanen. Doelwit van de aanslag was een gebouw dat door Amerikaanse militairen wordt gebruikt om de Saoedische Nationale Garde te trainen.
As I recall, there were 4 deaths, and this was attributed to Saudis with connections to the Hezbollah movement backed by Iran.
Initially, there was talk that Iran might have been behind it. But since that time, there's been discussion that it was fundamentalists linked to the network now known as Al-Qaeda. And when you see the kind of litany of Al-Qaeda operations, every time there's a new terrorist attack, this will generally be included.
وكل من رضي بفعلهم وتابعهم في هذه الحرب الصليبية بالقتال معهم أو بتوفير القواعد والدعم الإداري أو بأي نوع من أنواع الدعم والمناصرة لهم ولو بالكلام